Okay, hi patrons. Today's video is going to be about drawing these three horses. So starting on the left we have Indy, and then in the middle we have Charlie, and on the right we have Kirby. This video is going to be quite fast paced. It took 68 hours to draw and it's been cut down into an hour, so it is still going to look like it's quite fast, but I'm going to give you the basic rundown of what I am doing as I go. So I am starting on the eye of Indy, and I am just taking a sepia colored pencil. This is my Faber-Castell polychromos pencil, and I am just filling in the darker shadows around the eye and the eye itself, just to get an idea of the different values around the eye, and also so that I can better define the eye and see it there. So I've taken out quite a few colors, and there's just way too many to mention, but this is going to give you a good perspective of just how much is involved in the layering. So I'm just blending these colors in to get an idea of what they look like at their most pigmented state. This helps me identify whether I've got the right colors or not, because I have not used my swatches for this. I was just pretty much guessing the colors. So starting on the next eye, I'm doing the same thing, just using black and my sepia color to define the outline of the eye and the darker values. And I am paying special attention to my reference photo at all times, constantly looking at it and getting an idea of where everything needs to go. So here again, I am using a reddish tone color, and I am filling in some more details. Everything is obviously done with a very light hand. You'll see that I never press firmly, ever. I always blend the colors with my solvent, and that is what's going to give it a pigmented look, just like I am right now. This gives it a very bright pigmented look, and it gives me an idea of how bright the color really is. So the color dries really quickly when you use a solvent like this, so don't worry about just getting your paper wet with solvent. That's okay. You can put solvent on whenever you want, whether you have a little bit of a layer or you have a couple of layers on top of each other. Don't be shy with the solvent, because you're putting so little on the solvent as it is. Like to the touch, it's barely wet at all if you had to touch the brush. So at least it's not dripping with solvent, so it dries really quick when you do it that way. So now I am taking, I'm pretty sure that this is just a very dark grey, or it might even be the black. Oh, yeah, I'm just taking black and filling in the darkest value on the body. Again, using a light hand. You'll find that when you use Prismacolor pencils for layering, it's very easy to put lighter colors on top of the darker colors. So it's okay to use black tones as an underlayer as long as you aren't pressing firmly with the black. Now I'm taking very dark reddish color. I think it's terracotta, and I am just... No, it's not terracotta. This is terracotta. And I am again just lightly filling in the areas, taking note of which areas have more light and which areas are going to be lighter, and taking note of which areas are going to be darker. Now I am using my solvent to blend it in with a big brush. It's going to look very strange after this first layer. It's going to look quite stripy because I haven't really covered each inch of the paper with the pencil. So it looks very stripy as I blend it with the solvent, and it looks weird. You'll see many times instead of using a brush, I do use a piece of tissue. The tissue gives everything a much smoother blend, and it helps cover big areas a lot quicker than the brush does. So now just adding another layer with my black and filling in the really dark values. And then after that I will come in again with a solvent and a tissue and blend that in. And I'll keep layering like this until I am happy with the color. I did find that in the beginning of doing Indy that I didn't get her colors quite right. She ended up looking quite orange instead of like a deep red brown kind of color. So I just continued to blend like this. Now when I blend the color here, this is where I feel that she is too much of an orangey color. So I obviously know that I need to add more layers, make her a lot darker than what she is already, and keep building up those layers while I blend with this solvent, just to make sure that she gets darker and looks more like she does in the reference photo. So again, with a piece of tissue, blending all over, I still dip the tissue in the solvent, dab it a couple of times so that it's not too wet, and then blend it onto the paper. This makes it look really, really smooth, as you can see. I still don't think that Indy is dark enough, so I am going to go ahead and do this all over again. Another layer. So again, adding the dark values, and then I'll be adding more of the really deep dark reddish kind of tones, and then I will blend it all in again. Take note of your reference photo all the time. You can see where I'm trying to add those dark, almost kind of stripy values on her neck. And here I'm coming in with the really deep red, brown kind of color, and blending it in again, and she is finally starting to look a little better than what she looked before. Now focusing on the areas that are highlighted, I'm using a very much lighter color. I think this is a beige, and I'm just going to highlight it with the areas that capture more light. Because this is a Prismacolor pencil, and I blended with the solvent, it's easier to put this light color pencil on top of the darker values. You don't really get this right with the polychromos pencils. It's mainly the Prismas that sit where you can put the lighter color on top of the darker color like this. Because they're such a soft waxy base pencil, it makes it possible. The polychromos pencils, they are oil based and they're a lot harder, so the light does not sit on top of the darker colors as much as it does with the Prismacolor pencils. So I continue to blend and continue to put highlights, blend it in. You don't want the highlights to be too light and look too obvious, so make sure that everything's always blended in smoothly. Now going back into the eye and adding more detail and focus to it, I am taking note of my reference photo, and I am starting to build up those values in and around the eye. Again, these are going to be very many layers, and I'm just going to keep going and going by adding the colors, watching my reference, building up the layers, blending with solvent, building up the layers, blending with solvent, and I'll just continue on this way all the time. I always change my colors. I always take note of the colors. I'm not worried about the colors being exactly the same as long as it's close and it still looks like the reference photo, or it has a good relationship to the reference photo, so that people who had to know the horse in real life could look at this picture and know that it is a drawing of the same horse. I'm happy with that. The colors don't have to be 100% spot on. So don't worry about your colors. It takes time to get confidence like this with your colors. Don't expect to just get it overnight. It's going to take you quite an amount of time. And don't be shy to layer lots and lots of colors. Keep looking at your reference. You see, there are so many colors in the reference photo. It's not just one or two colors that have dark to light shadows or values. So now I'm just going to blend this in with the tissue. See what it looks like in its most pigmented state. There's quite a few bits of blue areas around the black areas. They're not black, they're more blue. So I just make sure that I add my indigo blue into the areas around the black and on top of the black as well. So Indy's face needs to be a lot darker, so adding more of those values and all those darker reddish tones. I liked using the espresso colored pencil, Prismacolor pencil a lot, because it looks like a dark grey, but it's actually a very dark brown. So it really is like an espresso color. Perfect name for the pencil. So also adding reds and browns and espresso, and I just keep adding on top of this. The nose, or the bridge of the horse's nose, looked very flat, so I just made sure that I came back in with my espresso pencil and focused on those values. I kept taking note of my reference. I kept checking which areas are darker, which areas are lighter, and I kept building up those values, because the nose at one point just looked very strange, and the vein there under the eye just looked like it stood out way too much, while the rest of it looked really flat. So when you notice things like this, just Make a point of looking at your reference photo all the time and taking note of why things look weird or different on your drawing as compared to the reference. Try and find what it is that isn't quite right and build up on that. There's a lot of room to correct any errors that you make, especially when you're using this method, because you're never using a heavy hand, so you can fix your layers up pretty good all the time. So don't be afraid of making mistakes. It's quite easy to fix the mistakes due to the amount of layering that it gives you. So now that everything's starting to get as dark as I wanted to, I am able to see which areas need to be even darker. The real shadowed bits need to have the black, just to add the add more of the value and the realism to it by emphasizing the shadows right underneath the highlighted areas. Now I am starting with Indy's hair on top of her head, and I'm going to start with her ears as well. You see that before I do my first layer of solvent, it always looks like crayon. It doesn't look smooth or anything like that. That's why I love the solvent so much, is you never have to worry about your pencils giving that crayon look on your paper, because you always blend all of that in, and you never have to worry about using a heavy hand either. So the white patch on her head is not white, it is lots of values of grey and a bit of black, and a little bit of white, but mostly greys, and I just add the values of light greys and a bit of white on that area of the patch to make it look nice and realistic. And now I can come in with the hair and I can go over that patch with the extra bits of strands and stuff, and then that will just make it pretty easy. So with the hair, I love using Prismacolor pencils with the hair, because again I can put dark values down and add the lighter values on the top. The individual strands of light hair I can just add over the top of the dark areas, and it looks quite realistic. So here I'm coming in with the lighter grey over the really dark areas of the hair, and I'm adding individual strands. Make sure some of the hairs go in different directions. You don't want everything to just go in the same direction, because then it looks stringy and fake. So I'm noticing I need even more detail around the eye. I'm highlighting a bit of the areas as well by using the lighter Prismacolor greys, and this makes the area look a little more, it adds a little more depth to the eye and realism as well. So these highlights are really good, and adding more highlights around that area and blending it in so it doesn't look too weird or too light. So taking note of the reference and adding the tiny details, like the tiny little scar on her head there next to her patch, I don't know if you can see, and just extra little details that better define the horse itself. Again, taking a lighter pencil to add those extra highlighted little details and the extra white little hairs that she has on her nose that you can just barely see. And these finer details are what makes things look super realistic and what just adds to the characteristics of that specific horse. Now just coming in with a black pencil, I am adding the darker areas of the ear, just making sure that I follow the right shapes and directions, and then coming in with an espresso color pencil as well after I've used the black and some browns before I blend it in with a solvent. And then again, I've got the dark areas blended in with the solvent, and now I can go with a lighter wax-based pencil in afterwards to add the individual strands. So here I am blending it all in the right directions, and you can't see any individual little hairs on the ears yet, But once it's dry, I'm going to come in with the lighter pencil, like I am now, adding those individual hairs and highlighted areas of the ear, and this is just going to make it look like it's more three-dimensional and realistic. Always taking note of the colors and of the reference. So now moving on to the back neck hairs, or the mane of the horse, I'm not sure what you call it. I am putting in darker values in those directions. Treat the hairs like they're pieces or shapes. You don't have to draw every individual strand. You just need to go in the right directions, add dark values and add light values in those different directions, and it will look realistic. So just make sure that there's very different strands going in different directions, not all in the same directions, and it will start looking good. Now make some areas of the hair really dark in between, and at the bottom where there's going to be more of a shadowed area, and make some of those areas really dark using your black pencil. Then you can go ahead and blend this in, and it's going to cover those white areas with a little bit of the pigment around it. And it'll still be easy to see the shape of the hair and the directions of the hair. Then you're going to go in again with pencil and add darker values. Blend it all in. I blended in with tissue, made it all really flat, try to get all that white covered. I don't want any white of the paper coming through. Any white that's on the horse must be white that I've done myself, or values that are lighter that I have created myself. Now coming in with a lighter value of grey, I'm going to add to those individual strands on the top, and that's going to bring the dark shadows to the back, bring the highlighted hairs to the front, and it's going to make it look really three-dimensional and realistic. Some areas I feel need more shadow, like the areas that are supposed to be underneath the hair. I'm going to add more shadow on the side by the skin next to the hair. And then right on the top of the hair, I'm going to add strands of hair that are going to be highlighted and that are on the top. Again, adding more detail to the nose. I'm going to pay extra attention to the nose and the little shapes of different areas around the nose, and adding the darker value first, and then I'll probably blend it in, and then keep adding values of different colors around it until I feel happy with the amount of detail in the nose. Using quite a bit of blues in the nose, because I can see in the reference that the black areas look quite bluish. So I'm going to take this to my advantage, use this to my advantage, and make sure that I add the bluish kind of cool greys on top of the black, just to give it more of a realistic effect. Then using a lighter beige, I'm going to add the areas that are highlighted right next to the areas that are really dark, and this is going to make it look like it's three-dimensional. And that is Indy done. Now moving on to Charlie. So Charlie's eye is quite dark, so it makes it very difficult to see the details in there. So looking at different reference photos of Charlie, I do make sure that I still put those colors in the eye, even though they're going to have a darker shadow in them. So take note of the shape of the eye, and try not to focus on the fact that you're drawing a horse. Just focus on the fact that you're drawing a shape that is separate to the horse. Pretend like you are just drawing that shape by taking note of that shape and nothing else around it. Don't be distracted by the areas around. If you find you are being distracted and that you aren't looking at your reference photo enough because your brain is trying to tell you that it knows what it's drawing, and it's not really focusing enough on the reference photo, then do yourself a favor and just cut out a square piece of paper, put it over the area that you meant to focus on, and this will help you ignore the rest of the area. You can do that, or you can turn the picture upside down and just focus on it that way. I find that turning a picture upside down does make it easier for me to forget that I am drawing a horse and that I am just drawing some strange shape and focusing on that shape alone. Because sometimes your brain can think that it knows what it's drawing when it doesn't really. It needs to be looking at the reference more. So Charlie's got some cute little pink sort of wrinkles around his nose, so I am just going to make sure that I take note of those. So right now I'm just using a dark sepia colored pencil. This is my Faber-Castell polychromos pencil, and I'm just adding the darker values. Just with a very light hand, and this just makes it easier for me to see which areas I'm working on, and it makes it a little more defined. So blending with the solvent and a brush, just mixing those colors in a bit more, smoothing it out with the tissue paper. And again, working on the different values, paying extra attention to my reference photo and working on the areas that are darker. By having these darker values lightly shaded in like this, it just makes it easier to identify which area you're working on and making sure that you're adding the right amount of color and detail to that area to make it look as close to the reference photo as possible. So layering with the different browns and oranges and just the colors I find are as close to the reference photo as possible, and then blending it all together. This is really going to make that value pop out and give you exactly an idea of what you're drawing and which area you should be drawing what sort of details, and just keep building up on those areas. Doing it this way, I just find it easier to identify every aspect of the drawing, so it's easy to jump from one section to the next because you know exactly where that area is on the reference photo. So obviously the reference photo has some flies there next to the eye. I'm not going to add those flies, of course. Always before you, if you're going to do a commission of a drawing and there's extra details that aren't really necessary, like flies, or if you're drawing a person, they might have some freckles or marks on their face that they don't want included, make sure that you confirm with them what they want included and what they don't want included in their drawing before you draw it. With the animals, a lot of them would have a collar or a harness, especially if you're drawing dogs. Ask the question, do they want that shown in the drawing, or would they prefer to have it without a collar or a harness, or the leash, or whatever's in the reference photo? Try and take note of the things that you don't think are necessary, and before you go ahead and draw a commission, make sure you confirm with the customer if they feel that they want those kind of details in the drawing or not. You'll find that most of the time they don't want it in the drawing, so it's better to be left excluded. So I'm always making sure to work in the right direction. Charlie seems a little more hairier than the other horses, so I am making sure that I'm doing longer little strands of strokes to create that illusion of having longer hair around the cheek area. Always making sure to color in the right direction. Taylor. My dog's making funny noises. So sorry if you could hear that. So always make sure that you are drawing in the right direction. And when you use your solvent, also make sure that you're blending in the right direction. So now I am moving on to the area of Charlie that is behind and underneath the last horse. So this is just a part of Charlie's body that is pretty much, it looks like it's under the chin of the next horse, but that's just the part behind. So that's just Charlie's legs, and I'm just making sure that I take note of the reference photo, and I keep following the right direction of what I can see, and I keep blending in the right direction, and I'll just continue to layer that way until I am satisfied. Now going on to the neck area of Charlie, I'm going to go in the right direction and I'm going to blend that in as well. There's obviously quite a shadow under the neck. This whole, pretty much the whole part of this leg area over here is also very shadowed. So I'm just going to make sure that I always darken those values until I find that it is dark enough. So now moving on to the next of the head. This part of the head and the top of the neck is getting the most light, so it's going to have the lightest values. So when I'm doing these real detailed areas, I always make sure that I have a very sharp pencil, and also that I never use a heavy hand, so that if I need to correct it, I will be able to blend it flat and try and correct it with the details on top. So the hair on the top of the head here is kind of going in two different directions, so I'm just making sure that I pay attention to that. And we just continue adding the colors and layers on top of the skin and the neck. Onto Charlie's ear. Creating the darkest values in the right directions. And then blending it, and then it will make it easier to put the lighter highlights in on top of it. So if you have a reference photo and you find that the ear is too dark, you have absolutely no idea which direction to go in because the area is just too dark, whether it be the ear or the eye or whatever the case may be, just take that reference photo on your phone and create or edit the photo so that it's in very high exposure and brightness. When you add the exposure and brightness to the photograph or reference photo, you will be able to see those subtle details. So then just put in those lines that you can see in the overexposed reference photo before you revert it back to the original drawing, and that will just give you a better indication of the outlines that you may require before you put your color down on your drawing. So Charlie's nose needs more detail, so I'm going in with like a blue-grey kind of pencil, and I am just filling in those darker values. The top area there next to the eye and under the hair is darker than the area that's a bit lower on top of the nose, and I just need to make sure that I pay attention to that and add value to those areas. I find that the eye needs to be even darker, so I am just adding value underneath the eye and in the eye, and on other areas that also need the extra value. The more you layer, the more you'll be able to indicate or find which areas need more value and depth, and then it just makes it easier to continue to add those until you are satisfied with what you've created. This is why layering is important. It just helps you see more and more the further you go, and it's good to gradually go darker and darker and darker because it's a lot harder when you go too dark to try and lighten it all up. So now adding detail in the nose, paying extra attention to my reference photo, making note of those areas that are highlighted, the areas that are shadowed, and making sure that I put the highlighted areas right next to the shadowed areas, and this is going to give it that three-dimensional wrinkled kind of look. Adding further details and blending it all in now, just so that it can all get smoothed out nice together and give the colored pencils more of a pigmented look. And it's all going to start taking form now and starting to look more and more realistic and more like the reference photo. So just paying attention to all areas of the horse, just so that I'm paying extra attention to all the tiny details that need to be added to the top. These tiny details are very important because they are what helps make something look very realistic. So going into those leg areas, I find that it still needs to be darker, so I'm just adding extra value to that. This area is also much darker because it's got a shadow cast from the horse next to it, so it's going to be quite a bit darker. So now we are moving into the final horse, Kirby. I am starting off with Kirby's eye. And I am going to do something a little different with Kirby. I'm going to use my sepia color, which I have now, and I'm going to put value down in every area of the horse. This is going to make it a lot easier for me to find all the different areas of the horse quite easily. So I'm just going to define all the values very lightly with the sepia color all over the horse, and then build up my colors from there. As a beginner, you'll probably find yourself doing this to most of your drawings. You like to have a base color down and put in all those areas of value, and this is just going to help better define things and better find different areas of the horse before you add the color. It does make it a little bit easier. So I have a very subtle light outline on my page, and by adding these light values, it's just going to identify those areas a lot easier. So now it should be quite easy for you guys to kind of see what the horse's face is going to sort of look like. But these values just show you quite nicely a better defined outline and location of different details. So this is just going to make it that much easier when it's time to add color. So throughout this horse I've only used one color so far, but some areas are darker than others. So I'm still using the same color but trying to create those different values by using different pressures on the pencil. Now adding more value to the eye and around the nose. If this were a graphite drawing, then this is the exact same approach that I would take and continue to build my values up with the graphite in this way. Now I'm going to start coming in with my underlayer colors. So these are just a bunch of different colors that I can see on my reference photo, but with a very light hand. And this is also just going to help me find the true colors that I want and start making this horse look like Kirby and how he should be looking. So with the underlayers, what I do is I usually try and find the right colors and just lightly put it down everywhere. And then before I do a second layer of color, I like to blend the underlayer colors in first, and this just adds to the pigmented look and shows you what the color would look like with a solvent. It's going to be much brighter, and then that also just helps you see if you are using the right colors or not. So if you use the wrong colors in the underlayer, that is okay. At least you can layer many times on top of it, and you should be able to find the colors that you really want. So you can see I'm constantly changing colors, blending them, mixing them together, going over each other's colors like that all the time, and that way colors aren't creating lines next to each other, and they're all just flowing in together nice and smoothly. Now I'm taking a tissue with a sharpish kind of point, dunked it in the solvent of course, and I am now blending it all together. This is also going to add more value, make the horse look more three-dimensional, and it's easy to see which areas are which, and then gradually add details to different areas as you go around. Okay, now going in, taking note of the eye, just paying extra attention to my reference photo and adding all those details. Make sure that you always have very sharp pencils when doing the eye. This just makes it easier to add those tiny details and tiny lines. Now I'm going to start with my darker values, and I'm going to keep building up these tones just like I did with the other horses, and continue to build up these layers constantly until it gives the realistic effect that I want. Now, I know that it's not zoomed in really close. If I do zoom in that close with my camera, it does make the quality a little bit worse, so that's why I don't do it. But in the future, when I start reaching my Patreon goals, I will be able to invest in a proper video camera so that I am able to zoom into every section that I'm working on real close, so that you can literally see every detail of my work. Okay, so building up those layers, you can see it's going to gradually just get darker and darker and darker, and this is what we want. It gradually gets darker, which makes it easier for us to control and get to the level that we want compared to our reference photo. So the bottom area of the neck and the chest is quite a dark shadowed area. So I need to make sure that when I build up the values in that area of the horse that it is a lot darker than the rest, due to the shadow that is cast on that area from the chin and whatever is in front of the horse. So blending that in, I can see that it is quite bright, and I'm definitely going to have to add more to the value, and the color is a bit too orange, so I need to add more of those browns and reds. Now, you don't have to draw in this way. With this horse or these horses, I've pretty much covered every area and then layered every area at the same time. You can, if you want to do the eyes first completely, do all the details in the eyes before you move any further. You can start and end, start in any area you want and build up around that area and gradually move along, or you can build up on the entire surface of the area and move forward that way. It's really up to you and what you decide to do. There's no specific way that you need to start an artwork. Because I'm constantly using the same colors around the whole surface of the area of the horse, I just like to add those layers at the same time and add solvent to those layers all at the same time, and that way I know that I'm adding all the same colors all over the horse, and it just makes it flow a little bit better, I think. I'm coming in with my black because I know that this area is going to be really dark. So I'm going to better emphasize the areas that are going to have the shadow. Create those shapes first before I fill in the areas more with the darker colors. Keeping in the right directions, I'm going to fill in that area before I go ahead and blend it. So at this point it does look a little bit stripy and crayony, but that's okay because we are going to blend that all together. So blending in this layer, you can see the colors getting super bright, and here we can see that the black is making this look really shadowed, and that's exactly what we want. This also helps me see that the face of the horse is way too bright and orange, so I'm gonna definitely have to work on those darker shadows. So I'm trying to get in all these darker shadows, working on areas of the nose, making sure that I'm adding those extra details, taking these dark values all over the face and making sure that I pay extra attention to my reference photo, so I know that I'm adding the values in the correct areas, and just keep building it up. Now blending it in, these values should be getting even darker, and this is starting to look so much better, and it doesn't look as orange and bright. It's starting to look closer to the reference photo. So I just realized over here that the nose is a bit further than the bodies, and we don't want that. It'll make it a bit weird when you try and frame it, because that means you're going to have to go over the nose. So I just extended those legs a little, just so that it'll be a better fit. Now moving on to the ears, I'm going to make sure that I add those values in the right directions before I put solvent on it and add the lighter highlights and individual strands of hair in the ears. So doing the hair on top of the head, making sure that I don't go too much over the white spot that's on the forehead. So I am paying extra attention to that. Making some hairs go in different directions so it doesn't look too stringy, and adding darker areas under some parts of the hair. Now I'm blending in the ears. Blending in the hair. And now it's just going to make it so much easier for me to see which areas need more work. So now that I know the hair, or now that I have the hair strands mainly over the spot, I'm going to go ahead and fill in all the details of the spot with my grays, just so the spot doesn't look too white and weird. And now I'm going to add the shadow, which I can see from the ear over the hair. Blend that all in. And then use a lighter pencil to create the highlights on top of the hair and in the ears. Now moving on to the hair on the back of the neck, paying extra attention to the different directions that it is going in, and making sure that I try and focus on those shapes and directions. Creating some darker values under the hair, on top of the skin, just to make sure that it gives that almost that illusion of a shadow just under the hair and on top of the skin. Blending it in with the tissue paper, and then I can come in and add more darker values in between the hair and give the illusion of shadows underneath. Adding more detail to the hair, always paying extra attention to the reference photo. These shadows really make things look realistic, so pay attention to those shadows. If you want anything to look smooth, go over with a piece of tissue. Now going in with a lighter pencil to add the extra highlighted strands of hair on top, and this is going to make it look more realistic. Also making sure that some of those strands are going in different directions, just to make it stick out a bit more and make it a bit more random. Now I'm going to go in and add all the final details. These details are just really subtle details that are going to make the horse look much more realistic and like the reference photo. Here I'm adding some highlights on the nose using a lighter wax-based pencil. And these subtle details really make a big difference. If you find that you've been drawing for hours and you're getting a little bit tired of it, move away and take the rest of the day off and come back the next day, look at it with a fresh pair of eyes and do the final touches then. Sometimes you feel like you're so excited to get something finished that you skip out on these last touches, and these touches can just make such a big difference. And we're getting close to the end of the drawing, but like I said, I'm just adding the real tiny details that are going to make this animal look like this animal, details that only this horse will have, and these are good details to add because these are a good identifier of that particular horse. So I'm just going back into Charlie, checking that I need a little more value around the neck there, so just adding more detail to him as well. And just trying to be as observant as I possibly can and getting a good eye on the entire drawing. Okay, so that is the whole drawing. I hope that this was useful. I know that that was very, very rushed, but hopefully that gives you an idea of just the sheer amount of layering that is required, and that it gives you a lot of room to correct any errors, and that the effect in the end ends up being quite realistic and beautiful and smooth. So thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys in the next tutorial. Bye!